I think we'll get started, okay? Okay, so here we're going to talk about antibiotic resistance, and I'm going to introduce the topic of antibiotic resistance and the others, and then some of us will come in and tell you a little bit about our research. So the European Centre for Disease Control estimates that about 25,000 people die a year as a result of infection by a multi-drug resistant bacteria, and that the additional healthcare costs that are associated with treatment of infections and the longer time you spend in hospitals, as well as the fact that you don't go to work when you're sick, that these costs relate to about 11 billion kroner. This is in the European Union alone. Recently, the World Health Organization published a report highlighting that antibiotic resistance is a serious threat and that we're heading to an era, a post-antibiotic era. So antibiotics have been considered the magic bullet. Everybody was super happy when we discovered them. But we truly are going through a phase where we cannot treat infections any longer because the bacteria are now resistant to them. And so these common infections that are usually very treatable, you can now actually die. And this is it's a possibility. So antibiotic resistance is a natural phenomenon. It is nothing we create and we cannot prevent it. But what is important to know is that if you use antibiotics, not only in human medicine but also in animals, you select for antibiotic resistant bacteria. Furthermore, it is because of poor infection control measures so that we do not prevent the spread of antibiotic resistant bacteria that this thing can permeate into the environment and from animals to humans. Further, also global trade, because we buy animals from other countries. We ourselves travel a lot, so bacteria are very easy to move. So you go to Greece on holiday, you pick up a nice antibiotic resistant bacteria, you bring it here to Denmark, and this is kind of how it spreads. Bacteria know no boundaries. And so we're talking about antibiotic use in animals, and this is very hotly debated in the news. It's constantly in the news. You have killer pigs, you have killer chickens, you have killer everything. But should we really be afraid? So antibiotic use is not a new topic in animals. It is something that has been debated for the last 50 years or so. And yes, antibiotic use does contribute to some of the problems we have in human medicine. But the truth is, we don't really know how big that contribution is. But a lot has been speculated in the media that, yes, we have these killer pigs, and yes, we have the killer chickens. But we're here to set the record straight, so please bear with us. Carmen?
Hello. Are pigs really from hell? You probably heard something in the news about resistant bacteria in pig farming and how this is spreading and causing many infections and even killing some people. So what is MRSA? First of all, I should say what Staph aureus is. It's a bacterial species that likes to live in healthy people. About louder? Yeah. Okay, I'll try. So Staph aureus is a bacterial species that is present in healthy people, and people, approximately 50% of the human population, have it in their skin and in their nose and basically everywhere. These sometimes can cause infections. It doesn't have to, but when it does, it can go from a very, very light infection, like a pimple in your face, to an infection of the blood that can be a little bit more threatening. So what is MRSA? It's not multi-resistant, it's methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus. That means that this bacterium, who can also colonize you in a very healthy way, sometimes if they cause infections, you cannot treat them with the usual antibiotics that we use for these kind of infections. So there are many kinds of MRSA. Some of them are regarded as to hospital-acquired MRSA, so they live within hospitals, and others are not related to the healthcare system, and then we call them community-associated MRSA. And the last group is the livestock-associated MRSA, or pig MRSA. This is the one that you've probably been hearing in the news in Denmark very much. There are some misconceptions about this, because first of all, it's not only present in pigs, it's also present in cattle, poultry, and horses. So the problem that we talk about pigs, we start to put it a little bit in perspective. It's different from that. One of the first misconceptions is that this is happening because we use a lot of antimicrobials in pig farming in Denmark. Not really like that. Denmark is within the countries that use less antimicrobials in pig farming in all Europe. And it's only 5 other countries that use less than us, and they do not have the intensive production system that we have here. Another misconception is that it's spreading everywhere and killing people. Actually, this bacterium is not very happy outside of the farm environment. Even farmers, after 24 hours that they haven't been in contact with pigs, they will lose it and they will be negative again. So it's not very successful outside of this box of pig farming and their families. And last, can it be transmitted from pork? Not at all. There are no cases, so it's nothing to do with a food problem. So yeah, sometimes we have to put things in perspective because they are not really supported by the scientific data what we hear in the news. And it's a little bit milder than we hear. And now we're going to hear about the chickens.
So good afternoon to all of you. In the next few minutes you're gonna hear something about how safe our chicken dinner is. And we are taking this into the perspective of antibiotic resistance and especially of ESBL bacteria. ESBL bacteria are dangerous bacteria because they are resistant to the antibiotics that you most commonly receive when you go to the doctor or if you are admitted to the hospital. I have spent a large amount of my time over the last 8 years in studying these ESBL bacteria in chickens, and I can tell you that the topic is not easy. Therefore, I become quite disappointed when I hear in the media that ESBL bacteria from chickens are actually killing a lot of Danish people or are causing severe infections in Danish people. Where is the truth in that? It is true that chicken meat, a higher amount of chicken meat is contaminated by ESBL bacteria in recent years compared to what was, for example, a couple of years ago. But I have decided to look at this problem in 2 ways. One is how the chicken meat actually gets contaminated by the ESBL bacteria. And the second point is this ESBL bacteria in the meat? Are they really dangerous for the human, for us consumers? After all, we do not eat raw chicken meat. To look at the first point, I can tell you that logical thinking implies that the chicken meat is contaminated if the live chickens contain this ESBL bacteria. Therefore, we have been testing chicken farms in Denmark, and we are still testing these chicken farms to find out if the chickens have the ESBL bacteria in the farm. And I can tell you that so far we find it only rarely in the live chickens, and when we find them, they are in very low numbers. On the one hand, this makes sense because poultry farmers use very few antibiotics in Denmark, and they do not use the antibiotics that specifically select for these ESBL bacteria. On the other hand, this leaves us still with the open question, where does the meat get contaminated from? The second point is about, are these bacteria in the meat really dangerous for us? What it is so far, the most common type of ESBL in chicken meat is not the most common type in infections in humans. So the take-home message from here is that currently chicken meat does not represent the main source of infections by ESBL bacteria in humans. Of course, we need to keep monitoring on that because ESBL in chicken meat is a recent phenomenon. So it may be that we still do not see an effect on public health if there is any. But so far, there is no reason for easy alarmism. Now it's all about chickens, and we're going to hear what our companion animals, dogs and cats, do to us about antibiotic resistance. So please welcome Archie Woodley again.
So how many of you have dogs here? Yeah? Okay, not that many. Ooh, tough crowd. You're afraid of dogs. And so you should be, and I'm going to tell you why. So for example, firstly, dogs are wonderful. I'm a dog person. My boyfriend's a cat person, but that's a whole other story. But dogs are good. They have been shown to be very beneficial for our health. Firstly, they prevent loneliness. So you see a lot of old people keeping pets, and it's been thought that they tend to live longer because they live for their pets, so it prevents loneliness. Also, what dogs do, I'm going to talk mainly about dogs. So dogs is also, they've been shown to be stress reducing. So people who have had a heart attack have shown to live, or they have a better prognosis of survival because of having a pet. And pets and dogs specifically are being used in pet therapy in hospitals. So what happens is some of these hospitals, they bring in dogs to come visit the patients because it's shown to improve patient outcome. But dogs do pose a threat to humans, and I think it's something that we do not even consider because we love our animals so much. Aside from biting you, of course, that's probably the biggest threat that they have. How many of you, those that have dogs, how many of you kiss your dogs? Come on, for real now. Yeah, you kiss your dog on the mouth, you kiss it everywhere. How many of you allow your dogs to sleep in your bed? Or sort of just to roam around? It's a part of your family. These are members of your family. In fact, I think some people take better care of their dogs than probably they do their own kids. In fact, I think that's what my mother says as well. She loves her dogs more than she loved us. But you allow your dogs to sleep in your bed. Truthfully, how many of you wash your hands after you touch your dog? Really? You do? Wow, I am impressed. That is amazing. Okay, well, then I don't need to tell you anything. But firstly, dogs, they do pose a threat. And antibiotic use in dogs here in Denmark is actually very, very high. It is something that we do not consider. There's been a 30% increase in the amount of antibiotics used from 2005 in dogs to 2012. And furthermore, more than 50% of all broad spectrum antibiotics is used in dogs. So if you consider, we have 29 million pigs, we have about 140 million chicken, we only have 550,000 dogs, and yet more than 50% of antibiotics is used in dogs. That I think is incredible, and that is something that is not debated in the news, is that your dogs could be the one that's also, dare we say, killing you. Furthermore, because we're using so much antibiotics in dogs, you have a bigger selection pressure, because I told you earlier, if you use antibiotics, you are selecting for antibiotic resistant bacteria. So, because you now use so much antibiotics in dogs, there's a bigger selection pressure to select for antibiotics, for antibiotic resistant bacteria in dogs. And really what we're seeing now is the emergence of multi-drug resistant strains in the dog population. And these strains are so resistant that we really have no drugs left to treat the animals. And sadly, the choice is that we have to kill the dogs because they do not survive the infection. Or the other option that we have is that we have to use antibiotics that have been reserved for human use. And that's a big no-no. That is actually something that is very much debated now. If you have an antibiotic that you can use that is only used in humans, do you want it to be used in animals? And I think that that's a very nice debate to be had, because actually animals have the right to treatment. They should not suffer. So why should we? Should we use it or not? What do you think? Should we use antibiotics that have been reserved for humans to treat an infection in dogs? Where the dog, if we do not treat it, we have to kill it. Sorry? If it's your dog, do you think you should? I mean, you have the right to think that. I mean, but this is something that is debated, and it's a very, very important issue. The other consequence to human health that dogs have, studies have shown that you can transfer antibiotic resistant bacteria from dogs to humans. This has been shown. We also know that because of the close contact between dogs, it's so easy to share. They eat the same food as us. They sleep in the same bed. You're touching them, you're kissing them. Actually, you are ingesting a lot of the same bacteria that they have. Dogs have also been shown to be vectors. They're also reservoirs. So for example, Carmen told you about MRSA. So when you have an MRSA infection here in Denmark, it's a notifiable disease, you have to undergo decolonization. This means that they try to get rid of the MRSA in your nose. But what is also part of the policy is that you have to decolonize the animal, because it's been shown that you can reacquire the MRSA once you have gotten rid of it, because your dog is having the MRSA. So the bottom line is that while dogs are extremely beneficial, and as soon as I have a bigger apartment, I would love to have a dog, they do pose a threat. And this is because of the huge amount of antibiotics that we use in them, and it's because of the really close contact with dogs. So we tend to share our strains. We share our strains with them. They're so kind, and they share their strains with us. So I think it's really, really important to consider that while we debate a lot about food production animals and the usage of antibiotics in animals, I think we should not neglect companion animals. And we are trying now to integrate a bit of a surveillance program to monitor usage in companion animals and the resistance that is appearing there. Because I believe that it's a bit more of a threat. Because when we think of production animals, we think of eating the animal. And really here in Denmark, we don't eat our dogs. I don't hope so. But I think enough about the dead, enough about dogs killing you and animals killing you and all of that. I think one thing is to look at the problem. We know we have a problem with antibiotic resistance. What we need is solutions. Because that's really, we can talk about problems all the time and it's very easy to point a finger and say, it is because of you we have this problem. But let's talk about some solutions, because I think we should leave this talk, our talk, with a bit of a smile on our face. And that's Bimmel's task, is to bring some light at the end of the tunnel.
So guys, what is the solution? So I think we will say the answer, very simple answer is we should develop new antibiotics. Answer is, I think, correct, but it is not realistic. To develop a new antibiotic, it takes 1 decade and $1 billion US. And another big problem is that the pharmaceutical companies, they do not feel any interest to invest such huge amount of money because the unpredictable market of antibiotics. Because nobody knows when bacteria will develop the resistance and make the new antibiotic ineffective, right? So we have to look the alternatives. Like we can revisit the option of phage therapy. So we know that HIV, that is a virus that kills us, and that also killed our wild desire. So phage is the enemy of bacteria. Phage attack and kill the bacteria, but it has no significant effect on human health. So we can use our enemy's enemy, phage and phage derivatives, to combat against antibiotic resistant bacteria. And additionally, what we can do, another thing is that we can find out some drug from our, that is non-antibiotic drug, from our entire existing drug market, and we can use in combination with our standard antibiotic, which will bring the power of the antibiotic, which will enhance the power of the antibiotic, and which will kill the superbug, which will kill the antibiotic resistant superbug. So our group is actually working using the phage and phage derivative, and that we are trying to use to treat the antibiotic resistant diseases, and also we are using the non-antibiotic helper drug and in combined with the standard antibiotic to enhance the power of the antibiotic. And additionally, right now what we are doing, we are trying to develop the new non-antibiotic drug, which actually bring the new novel non-antibiotic molecule in the market, which in combination with the standard antibiotic bring more power of the antibiotic, and it will kill the bacteria. Because if we develop the new non-antibiotic drug, which will actually not need to, we don't have to use the new antibiotic, we have to use the present existing antibiotic with the non-antibiotic drug, helper drug, which will give us more power to combat against the antibiotic resistant bacteria. Okay? To know more, you can visit our website, University of Copenhagen, Research Center for Control of Antibiotic Resistance, UCCare. Okay? Thank you.
So we have some time. Any questions?
What's a helper drug?
What's a helper drug? So what Bimmel is trying to do is, these are looking at some non-essential genes in the bacterium, something that stresses the bacteria when they're in the presence of the antibiotic. So the idea is that if we can target those genes, we create the stress for the bacteria, and when we use it in combination with the antibiotic, we're able now to target resistant bacteria using the antibiotics we already have and this new helper drug. Yes?
Why don't you use a virus?
Yeah. So that's actually part of my research is we're trying to see if we can use viruses to kill bacteria, and these viruses are very specific. But viruses, it's a bit difficult to get ethical approval for that, because essentially what you want to say is that, can I give you a live virus? Are you willing to ingest that? And there's a lot of other things that are associated with using viruses, is that they themselves act as vectors in which they can harbor antibiotic resistant genes, they can harbor toxins that will benefit the bacteria but be bad for us. So the other thing is that you cannot use bacteriophage for, say, if you have a gastrointestinal infection, because the phage does not really survive very well through the gastric tract. But if you want to use it topically, that's promising. So that's what we're trying to do. So thank you very much for listening to us.